On today's episode of the ExploreVM podcast, we talk community around conferences, specifically VMworld. Hello, and welcome to the ExploreVM podcast. Today we continue our look at VMworld 2019 with more conversation around being involved and being active at the conference. What is it actually like to attend a conference with 25,000, 30,000 people? How not to feel so alone from time to time? And, you know, as we continue the theme, a lot of these guests have been on the podcast before, but we do have some new first-timers this time. I hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the ExploreVM podcast. We are here once again at VMworld 2019, and I have once again, as is the theme of my podcasts this week at the conference, another repeat guest. Sean, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick?
All right. Good morning. Thanks, Paul. My name's Sean Massey. I am now a staff cloud solutions architect with VMware, which is a change from the last time I was on. So I work in our cloud provider business unit focused almost entirely on end-user computing and doing really cool stuff at scale.
Excellent. So I've covered a multitude of topics with a few of my guests this week at the conference, and one of them that you and I were just talking about is when you're out here and it's like your first time, or if you don't know a lot of people, why don't you go ahead and kick off that conversation? Right. So
during VMworld, there was a tweet by a wonderful gentleman named Steve Athanas, where he talks about, how his first VMworld 10 years ago, it was kind of lonely being in a sea of 20,000 people, and how VMworld can be intimidating for the first time.
Right.
And, I agree with that. And I think there's a lot of discussion here on how we can help people who've come to VMworld for the first time and, get them immersed in our community. Because the VMware community, the virtualization community, if we want to go so far as to include anything covered under the virtualization topics, it is really massive and really, really welcoming to people. It's just a matter of getting started with it. And VMworld, so, to Steve's point, right? My first VMworld was in 2013.
Okay.
And I had come here. I was barely on Twitter, but I was not immersed in the community. I knew a few of the VMUG leaders, but I wasn't really close to them and didn't know them very well. And I showed up and I was lost, right? It's overwhelming. There's so many people, and like a lot of people in the tech community, I'm an introvert. I would probably almost classify myself as an extreme introvert, which is surprising for those people who know me through the community, right?
Right, yeah. Once you're comfortable with somebody, you get pretty social.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was overwhelming, and I can really relate to that, right? So what I want to talk about today a little bit is, how can we help as a community get people comfortable with VMworld?
Right.
And what are some tips and tricks and things that you can do that if you're attending a conference for the first time, you can, not just go to some sessions and then go to your room and sleep.
Right.
So to kind of get started with that, I think, conferences are hard. Conferences are very hard, especially when you don't really know anyone.
Yeah.
And you can try to go meet people at lunch. You can try to, sit down at a table and talk with them, or talk to the people next to you in the session. But hey, we're all here for work. Most of us don't necessarily just want to have random conversations with people at our tables. So how do you get started then, right? How do you get the most value out of the conference beyond just what's in those sessions?
Right.
So there's a couple things I think you can do. The first is let your vendors know, right? If you have good relationships with your vendors or your partners, right, tell them you're coming to VMworld. Find out if they're doing anything, or find out if the people you're working with are going to be there.
Okay.
Right? It helps to always know somebody.
Absolutely.
Right?
I will just jump in real quick. My first VMworld was San Francisco 2015. And I kind of got lucky because I spent a couple of years with a lot of the local VMUG people before I actually made my way out here. So I had some small relationships that I could, people were introducing me to other people, which led me to other people. And so I got real lucky because I happened to know two people fairly well before I got out here.
And that's how we struck up our friendship, because we hung out more at VMworld, even though we only live like 2 hours apart.
Right.
We hung out at VMworld, and then we started talking more at local VMugs, and then on Twitter and things like that. So we were able to build a relationship because of those introductions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So talk to the people that are coming. Right. And if you don't know anybody, right, that's okay. Right, because one nice thing about VMworld and the VMware community in general is that we actually have a community space here at the conference. So this year, it was called the Square. In the past, it's been called VM Village. It's been called the Hang Space. And what's nice about it is there's tables where people are just kind of sitting and blogging. And can I swear?
Mildly.
Okay. So there's people just shooting the shit.
Okay, yeah, that slides.
Okay. So, they're just hanging out here and, talking. And it can be intimidating because a lot of us know each other from Twitter or from previous VMworlds or VMugs, but you just come up to the table, you sit down, introduce yourself. And there was somebody at the table a couple days ago. It was her first VMworld. She was here working for a vendor as part of their booth.
Yep.
And she just sat down at the table, and within like 15 minutes, it's like she was an old friend.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She just sat down, and she even was on I believe it was the VMworld or VMware Instagram account shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
Talking about, hey, the best way to meet people, just sit down and start talking.
Yeah.
And they, she clearly met the person from VMware right there, and they're like, hey, do you mind if we can get you on here? So, yeah she is 100% right. These blogger tables, the social area, especially, I would say the blogger area, there's a lot of people who do know more, know each other well, versus just out in, the general community area. Mm-hmm. But that being said, the blogger area is very welcoming.
Yeah.
If you sit down, if you start looking through stickers, most of the time someone's going to go, oh, hey, or, if you say, hey, I've read your stuff, or I follow you on Twitter, people like to hear that. It's a real good icebreaker, real easy icebreaker.
Yeah, and so, this morning I got here a little bit early.
Yep.
I was, had a schedule snafu, and I ended up at the blogger table at 7:30 in the morning. There was someone who stopped by. I was the only person practically in here.
Yeah.
Stopped by, was looking at stickers, introduced myself, had a really great conversation with him, and, and was able to learn more about him and, give him some advice for, getting more out of VMworld in the community.
Yeah.
And those are the kinds of interactions that are great to have at VMworld, because it's really hard to do that in the lunch area or waiting in line for sessions. It's hard to build meaningful interactions.
Right.
So now, obviously, our VMworld is basically almost over by the time we're recording this, and by the time this publishes, it will be over. So, if you're thinking about coming next year, right, or thinking about going to any other conference, what are some other things you can do? So to start with, I think you can find the local user group.
Yeah.
Get started with whatever the local user group is for that technology. You are going to meet people there, and you are going to start building relationships. So as you alluded to earlier, right, your first VMworld, you knew people from VMUG.
Yep.
And so you were able to come and utilize those interactions and those relationships to meet more people. So do the same. Find your user groups, participate,
right.
And hey, all user groups are always looking for community presenters, and yes, they really do want to hear from you.
Yeah, for sure. That's a whole nother topic, but yeah, for sure, the end user versus the vendor content over and over again. That's what people love.
Yeah.
But yeah, so your local user groups, the vendor ran user groups. Like there's, I know. So we're at the VMworld conference. We know VMUG. And that's community ran. But there's also like the Nutanix user groups, and I believe Splunk has a community.
AWS,
and even if you go on like Meetup.com. And you look around your area, there is so many different technology, like vendor agnostic meetups. You can look at your local Spiceworks chapter. There's plenty of places to meet people of similar mindset when it comes to technology, and they are a great way to make those relationships before you even get out here.
Yeah, exactly. And there's user groups for everything out there. It's hard to believe, just how many user groups there are, and you can find something for any technology,
for sure.
any level, any skill set level. right? And if there isn't something local to you that you're interested in, and you know there's others that are, start something, right? Yeah, and that can be really hard too to get done, but you know, it's as simple as throwing something up on Meetup and finding a space to do it.
Yep. And, you know, so obviously there's some prep work you can do before you arrive at the concert. Wow. Hello, Paul. We are recording this early in the morning on what is the final day, so my coffee still hasn't kicked in yet.
Yeah, it's almost about 10 o'clock. So...
So yeah, I mean, it's been a long conference. I apologize. So before, you know, there's some prep work you can do before you get to the conference to, you know, kind of get some relationships established, or at least get a couple of names to look for. And then we pointed out the blogger area. Any other suggestions for once people are here that, you know, you're not certain, you're kind of like with one or two people, or you're here on your own? Any other suggestions?
Well, for starters, join Twitter.
Okay. Yep.
All right. Or, yeah, for VMworld, it's definitely join Twitter.
Yeah.
Right? And follow the VMworld hashtags. There's a lot of people who are active in the VMware community who are on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can... Almost everybody in the community is approachable. No, scratch that. Everybody in the community is approachable on some level. And so you can reach out to them. You can, you know, if you go to a session where one of them is speaking, you can let them, you know, you could tweet to them afterwards, you know, if questions, if you couldn't get them asked, or, you know, how much you enjoyed the session. You know, that's a great opportunity to build some interactions. And I realize it's social media, so it's not necessarily in-person, face-to-face stuff. But it's still a way of starting to build relationships and to start building I'll say this, to start building a brand.
Yep.
Right? Another thing is, if you can do it, you know, get to some of your vendor parties, right? And I realize, right, you know, we're talking about a large conference, and then you're going to go to a vendor party where you're going to have large interactions again.
Right.
But try to take advantage of that time, right? If you know your account team is going to be there, or people you know from the company are going to be there, spend some time, talk to them while you're there.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And see if you can get some introductions while you're doing that too. One of my favorite memories from VMworld, I think it was 2014 or 2015.
Okay.
This is actually the one where I met Aaron Bolthouse.
So that's probably 14. So
yeah.
We all knew each other by the time I got out.
Yeah. So I was at a Commvault party with my boss.
Okay.
And this was my second VMworld. We were standing there at this table, just, you know, my boss and I were just, you know, eating some free food, drinking some free booze. We'll probably have to cut that part.
Too late. It's on the record.
So we were just hanging out there at the party, and we happened to pick a table where Aaron was. And we just start talking. And my boss was a little bit more outgoing than I was. But, you know, we start talking about the technology and everything. And then this guy comes sauntering up to the table and starts talking to us. And it turns out he was a VP at VMware.
Okay.
And we just had this great interaction. And then through that, we ended up hanging out with Aaron more.
Nice.
Right? So running into him and doing things. And, you know, that's the great thing about this, right? You never know who you're going to interact with. Now, if you're by yourself, this is where it gets to be a little bit more challenging, because it's hard to go up and introduce yourself to people. Right. But if you are on Twitter, if you are reading blogs, and, you know, you come across a blogger or somebody in the community that has helped you, just introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
My first VMworld, this was before I had worked for a head for a little bit. I saw on the last day of VMworld, I saw Chris Wall walking, and his blog had been very helpful. Yeah. I walked up to him, introduced myself. It was a 3-minute interaction, but it was great.
Yeah.
Right? And most people are very approachable like that too.
Oh, for sure. Those tech rock stars you follow on social media, they're just people like you and I, and 90% of them don't think of themselves as rock stars.
They're not rock stars.
That's very presumptuous. So
they are not rock stars.
I do want to say really quick, touching back on the sessions where you said to follow up or like tweet out to the presenters. Also, most presenters you can walk up to after the session and ask questions and continue conversations about that. And even if it's just, hey, I really enjoyed that, thank you. Like the feedback that presenters get, they appreciate.
Yeah.
So, Sean, I want to be conscious of your time here at the conference. Is there anything you've got going on online, or where can people follow you? Any projects you want to promote?
So, yes, you can follow me on Twitter at Sean P. Massey, and we'll make sure to include that in the show notes. I also have a blog, thevirtualhorizon.com, and there will probably be some projects coming in the near future. I've got some ideas I've wanted to kick around, learning how to animate and then do stuff around EUC with animation on YouTube.
Oh, interesting.
That probably won't happen because I'm lazy. And then there might be some talk of a book in the works.
Oh, excellent.
So
awesome. Well, once again, sir, I want to thank you.
All right. Well, Paul, thank you for having me on.
Welcome back to the ExploreVM podcast. Continuing on our conversation that I just had with Sean Massey about your first time VMworld, he has funneled a couple of guests into the podcast booth here. They weren't terribly willingly, but they're here now and they're smiling, so I appreciate it. Guys, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick?
My name's Eric Stacy. I am here with the VExpert program's Blogger Pass this year. It's my second VMworld. I've been to one in Las Vegas in 2017, and this is my first trip out to San Francisco for VMworld here.
All right.
I'm Brandon Lunt. I'm just a regular VMware attendee, and this is a first for me in every respect. First time in San Francisco, first VMworld. Yeah.
So you had the benefit of being here with somebody who's been to the conference before. How has this first experience at VMworld been?
Overwhelming is easily the best answer. I feel like throughout the week, as I've turned any corner, there's been like a whole new conference center that I've run into, right? And it just the campus, the amount of people. It's been really crazy to watch like the herds of people trying to move from one session to the next,
right?
And all of the logistics that happen behind all of that, right? And then you go from witnessing that to in a deep technical session, and it just, the whole experience is very, very overwhelming.
Oh yeah, and so now Eric, you're here on your second time, and you've made it to the blogger program for year 2. That's pretty awesome. So what are the differences you're noticing between Vegas and San Francisco, or even your first time versus your second time? Are you more comfortable? Are you still kind of like wide-eyed and bushy-tailed about what's going on? What's year number 2 like for you?
Probably a bit more comfortable just with the sheer volume of people.
Yeah.
I remember turning around the first corner in Las Vegas after checking into my hotel room and coming down the registration table and just seeing the wall-to-wall sea of people just marching towards the registration booth. San Francisco is much more open, so there's still some of that shock of realizing that I need to run from like Moscow and south to west in about 5 minutes between sessions.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting change, and I like a lot of things about this location over Vegas, especially because you do get to step outside for a period of the day, and you don't melt in the sun when doing so.
That's fair. That's fair. So, when you were out here for your first, back in 2017 in Vegas, that can be a very overwhelming town as it is. So then you couple 25,000 user conference on top of that. Were you out with coworkers? Did you know people from like a VMUG? How was your very first experience?
I was out in Vegas with one coworker, but he was actually speaking with a vendor at the time.
Okay.
So I didn't see him at all until the second day.
Oh, so you're just out there in the wild.
Yep, and I was very new to the V community, and I'm not a very outgoing social person, so I had kind of stalked people on Twitter. So I didn't really know anyone but Sean.
Yeah.
And he was busy doing his thing where he's bouncing around between everyone he's been talking to for years at that point.
Right.
So it was a lot of just taking in the shock and wandering halls and trying not to get run over at that point.
Right. All right, so first VMworld, San Francisco, 2019. We're at the end of the conference. What's your overall impression?
My overall impression is there's no way to do everything that's here.
Yeah.
Right? So I've been to another tech conference, the Global PowerShell Summit, and that's a kind of conference that you can get to do everything. Right? If there's something you're interested in, you can make it to every last thing. It's a 500 people conference,
right.
So you get to know everybody. It's very close-knit. And being here, you really kind of realize that the VMUG community is very active, and if you're looking for that same sort of like inclusive membership of things, that's where you find that here. If that's not your thing, then you avoid the VMUG people, and you're just another body walking around. Is really kind of how that goes. And the Solution Exchange is a daunting experience with all of the booths and the lights. It just
my first VMworld was 2015 in San Francisco, and I've been to VMUGs and I've seen like the small hall. I'm like, oh, this is cool, got all these vendors. When I came down the escalator here, and just the image of the vendor hall started to appear in front of me, and like you said, the lights, the booth, the LED screens, and it just kept going. It was I wouldn't say overwhelming, but it was nuts. And to walk around and try and meet all the vendors and try to get all the swag, because I know a lot of people, especially your first time, you're like, swag, like it's great getting all this stuff, until you try to pack your luggage and go home. Right. Like that was an impressive feeling. And so my wife does social work, and she's in like the accounting world as well. And she goes, yeah, I go to a conference and I give away like some pens and maybe some like candy, and I'm coming home with like a drone, some battery, it's all sorts of stuff. So I sent her a picture. She's like, this is absurd.
Right.
I'm like, it absolutely is absurd, but it's the world we live in, and these vendors, they have to kind of stand out. They have to like pull you into their booth because there's 5 others that are doing the exact same thing. Yeah. So with the scheduling and with sessions, did you do the usual schedule way too many sessions and try to make them all, or did you kind of bounce around and pick a few?
I was lucky enough to have people give me the advice that make sure you have enough open space in your schedule to make it out to do other things, and that especially if a session's recorded and it's not something you have a question for the speaker, probably skip it and go and do something else, because there is that much.
Right.
So I usually had sessions scheduled in the morning, and then plan to do like the V brown bags for the afternoon, or the Solution Exchange in the afternoon.
Okay.
Just so I had that kind of flexibility for things.
Excellent. And Eric, is that what you did as well?
Yeah, I probably accidentally took it to a bit more of extreme, because I wasn't really sure what to expect with being out here on the Blogger Pass. Like I didn't know if we were going to get corralled into a special area for, I didn't know if I was supposed to go to like the extra showcase keynotes, which they were all full by the time they popped up. But I've stopped in some sessions just in the wait line that didn't end up being full, or I have spent a lot of time in the V brown bag area or just the social area, and it's been a much less stressful time than in Vegas. I did the sessions just back to back,
right?
And almost forgot that lunch was only for like an hour and a half in the thing, and then I'm like, oh, I need to exit this session real quick if I want to eat today.
Right.
Well, and the brown bags were a really amazing thing to me, because those were as technical and as informative as any session I've gone to.
Oh,
right?
For sure.
And I was not expecting that. I was more expecting somebody who just, had a couple too many cocktails and was like, yeah, I can talk about a thing, and like get up there, and that's not at all what that was.
Yeah, no, and I've done a couple of those V brown bag sessions this year. Like leading up to the conference, I was pretty busy. I didn't submit any call for papers. I didn't submit anything for the tech talks out there. But I've loved the V brown bag community. Those sessions, because it's guys like you and I. It's just everyday admins, everyday people. Yeah, they'll get a couple of vendors in there here and there, and it's not really even when the vendors are up there, it's not too salesy. There's more tech, and that community has embraced the tech. Whereas you can walk into some of these sessions here, and you're getting a half an hour of the 45 minutes as a sales pitch. And so, I mean, I get it. It's kind of like the nature of the world we live in. But the fact that VMware has embraced the V brown bag community and brought them in and allowed them to do this, I think it's pretty awesome. So we're coming up pretty quick here on the time I told you I'd make you stick around. So real quick, from a first-timer at VMworld, advice for somebody coming out for their first conference.
Get involved in the V community, absolutely. And don't book yourself for everything, because you're absolutely going to need some sort of downtime, right?
Yeah.
That's what the beanbags are for. And just plan on needing some sort of extra something during the week to manage it.
Right. And from a two-timer?
I guess I'll just echo the not booking yourself crazy on sessions. Watch the general sessions, but I do recommend it from the beanbag chairs, because they are amazing, and I wish I could take one home. And even if you are not a blogger or follow the V community on social media that much, stop by that area, stop in. They're not going to kick you out if you're not actively blogging. It's a great place to meet people that are there to meet other people. So
excellent. So where can my listeners find you online?
I'm on Twitter at VUper.
I don't really have like a online presence.
No online presence yet?
Not really.
By the time I see you at the next VMworld, there better be something out there. So, all right, guys. Well, I want to thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome back to the ExploreVM podcast. I have a fellow blogger and podcaster and active community member here with me. Tim, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so Tim Smith. I'm one of the VMUG leaders for the Cincinnati VMUG, and people can find me on Twitter at @tsmith_co, and so I blog over at Tim's Tech Thoughts is the name of my blog, but I also have a YouTube channel, v101.tv.
So I've been a guest on your stuff a couple of times here now. You've mostly gone, hey, help me set this up, and then you just start going, okay, now talk. And a lot of the people I know, or I get asked a lot of questions, what is it like to start a blog, or in your case, like a YouTube channel? I've dabbled with it, nothing like you, but what are some like experiences, like what's it like to get that going?
So the blog was by far the easier thing to get started. So I had a coworker who years ago was like, well, that's really cool, because I figured something out around, like, I don't remember what, is ejecting VM hardware for a terminal services VM. And he's like, well, you should totally just start a blog and put that on there because people would find it useful.
Right.
And so, honestly, the most amount of time for that was just finding a place to put WordPress and picking out a theme.
Yeah.
But starting up the YouTube channel was a little bit more difficult because it's something I'd never done before. I had never uploaded videos. I'd never recorded videos outside of, like, home videos. So
right.
My thought was to almost create, like, a learning channel, and outside of just talking with other people, I hadn't done any of it. So I had to we find something that would take good enough video, good enough sound. It's funny looking back at my channel, my first video was just me doing selfie mode with my iPhone with the cord into the earpiece, just using that corded mic, and the audio was terrible.
Yeah.
But I think that was the thing I realized, that was audio was more important than video.
Okay. As you've grown and as you developed, what softwares did you start with for video editing, and have you gone past that, or what did that process look like?
So, to start with, honestly, I would just the first maybe 10 videos I did was just all on the iPhone in selfie mode, and if I was unhappy with it, I'd do it again. And so all I ended up doing was just trimming off the front and the back. Okay. And posting it. Okay. No editing.
Like straight on through.
No sound editing, nothing.
Right.
What I'm doing now is actually almost just as simple. So I'm using Camtasia.
Okay, yeah.
And I know there's much more powerful items out there for editing, but honestly, Camtasia works good enough for me because I've learned I can separate the audio out. I still use my iPhone, but now I flip it around and use the better camera.
Yeah.
And I'll record now in a higher resolution and whatnot. But yeah, I've found that Camtasia works perfect for what I need because I can separate out the audio. They have like sliders where I can remove noise levels, so I can remove some background noise. I figured out that's possible. As well as I picked up a H1 Zoom.
Okay.
It was like a $99 little recorder. I think it's 2-channel. It's got 2 microphones that kind of X across, but it allowed me to use that if I wanted to as a handheld mic, or just set it on the table in front if I'm recording a couple people.
Right.
And I figured out then you can add that in as an audio track. I soon learned that you should clap or do some sort of noise spike so you can sync up the audio to the video.
Right.
But that's now typically what I do. I also picked up like an Audio-Technica little lavalier mic or lapel mic.
Yeah.
And it's really just, so that's kind of the equipment I use now. And Camtasia is good enough to where I can put like a nice little intro logo in the front and an intro logo in the back if I need to put text or something.
Right.
I'm not doing any sort of like fancy fly-in flamey effects on my...
Right. just a name, just a graphic.
Right.
Nothing, yeah, you're not putting cartoon figures dancing around.
A graphic I didn't even create. I sourced it out on Fiverr.
Nice. Do you record these videos when you're only at conferences, or do you do this at home as well?
A little bit of both. So at home, I'll do mostly screen recordings. So like the V101.tv is supposed to be my kind of like introduction to virtualization and technology. I try to make them like some sort of educational video. Somebody should be learning something about tech. So I'll record myself setting up a vSAN cluster. And I'll put my little webcam picture of myself in the bottom while I'm talking, because I always like to look at people when they're talking, and not just a voiceover for those type of videos. But so those mostly videos are me at home screencasting. I've also done the me standing in front of my whiteboard at home a long time ago, whiteboarding, and but the ones I do at conferences are always the ones with the other people. So I'll set up my iPhone on a tripod and set up the H1 Zoom, and usually I'll talk with them not so much as an educational thing, but more about their thoughts on whatever the conference is about. So not just Tim's thoughts on tech, but other people's thoughts on tech. So this conference, I sat down and I just wanted to get people's ideas of educational resources, and so I got a handful of people to sit down, and I'll probably throw that together in a video.
Right.
And
Oh, good deal.
Yeah.
I'm sure, like the rest of us, when you're coming up with ideas for your videos or your blogs, you run into writer's block or ideas block. Where do you come up with your ideas, and what do you do to counteract your writer's block when that happens?
Yeah, I had, for the longest time, I'd be like, oh, I should write about this. And they'd be like, well, no, so-and-so already wrote about that. And, I've already seen 3 or 4 blogs. And my wife had a really good suggestion for me, which is that people don't want to read your stuff because it's necessarily unique. They might want to read it because you present it in a way that's different or that's more understandable for them.
Right.
So I know I'll read particular blogs that are easier for me to consume just because maybe the writing style, or they'll give analogies of like, well, this technology is like this, and it's like, oh, well, that makes sense to me. But other people, their communication style doesn't match with my listening style. So
right.
I've had to work hard to get over the whole, it doesn't have to be unique content, it just has to be my content. But it's still difficult to think of things to write or video about. And I think that's why I wanted to start the instructional video side, because it seemed to be a little bit easier to say, well, there's going to be new people starting.
Yeah.
And this knowledge that I take for granted of what I might think is easy, right? Adding a host to a cluster or setting up vCenter. Somebody's doing that for the first time, so they might want to go look that stuff up. So I've been leaning a lot more on the beginner, intermediate knowledge to blog and podcast about versus the advanced, let's dive into the code and, go all hacker on it.
Right. Excellent. Well, I want to be conscious of your time. We are still, here at VMworld, and you actually have to speak momentarily at the V Brown Bag stage. So
I do.
I will let you get going here, but before you go, where can my guests find all of your videos and your blogs and find you on the internet should they want to learn more?
Yeah, so Twitter at tsmith_co. I blog over at tsmith.co. Putting an M on the end of that CO was a little too expensive, but... and then for videos, if you just go to v101.tv, it will redirect right to my YouTube.
Excellent. Well, once again, sir, I want to thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
As always, thank you for listening. We've got a little bit more content around VMworld 2019 coming up. That'll be some shorter episodes, more like mini episodes, and then we're going to dive right back into the HCI series. If you'd like to keep up the conversation around VMworld 2019, if you've got an idea for a show topic, or you'd like to be a guest, reach out to me on Twitter at ExploreVM. Find me on Facebook, facebook.com/ExploreVM, or email me, paul@ExploreVM.com. Once again, thank you for listening.